Okay, so this week we're learning Menahot of Lamed Zayin. It's really two different ideas. One is an interesting case that is brought in the Gemara about somebody who has two heads and the halachic ramifications of that. We'll talk a bit about kind of the irony of the story and how it plays out versus kind of the contemporary potential halacha implications of it. And then focus more on an example of somebody else in the Agadata who doesn't necessarily have two heads, but has kind of one head with two parts, namely Adam Rishon, and look at different opinions on how that is understood and what it's trying to come and explain. So, if we start with the Gemara in Menahot and Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, Ba'i minei Plimo mi Rebbe. So, a man named Plimo asked Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Mi sheyesh lo shnei rashim be'ezeh mehem meniach tefillin? Right, a simple question, right? There's someone with two heads, so which one do you put the tefillin on? So, Rebbe's answer is I think, pretty humorous. So he says, Amar le o kum gale o kabel alach shamta. So either send yourself into self-imposed exile, or I'm going to excommunicate you for asking such a ridiculous question. Right? Adahachi ata hu gavra. And then after a time, a man came before Rabbi and Amar and said to him, Iti lidli yenuka didle treiraishe. So a man comes and says to Rabbi, I just had a baby who has two heads. And he asks, Kama ba'inan lemeitav lekohen. For pidyon ben, how much do I have to give? Okay.
Did we not believe that there was two-headed people before this? Is that why he was sent the first guy away?
So it's not that they didn't believe that two-headed people could be born, it's they didn't believe two-headed people could live to the age where they would have to put tefillin on. So I think the explanation here is that they did know of the phenomenon of people being born with two heads, but they always died in infancy. That's why Rebbe was at least that's the explanation for why Rebbe objected initially, but then they have this practical case after. But I think you're alluding to maybe the irony of this sugya, which is that with modern medicine, you can have people who live into adulthood with two heads, and the only source we have in halacha is Rebbe's get out of here, and then what does that really mean?
Well, on the other end, modern medicine usually prevents the cases where you actually get to a situation to begin with. Usually you see like the third world countries, you see in India, like these bizarre cases, but
Yeah. The other point is that depending on what age they used to live to, it could be they weren't aware if it was one person or not. Nowadays they grow up, it's two different people, they're different. So they'd be both mechayev and putting on tefillin on each of their heads. Beautiful.
That is exactly the question that we're going to be asking. Is it considered one person or two? To your point, there's in the Achronim, the poskim are about, okay, this is clearly talking about a person that has one torso and two heads. But you have cases of Siamese twins where, that's not necessarily how it's structured. They're kind of glued together at the head and it's two separate bodies. Would that be considered different or the same?
Although the second question isn't exactly, doesn't sound a little physically possible.
The one that we didn't read yet?
No, just now in the Gemara.
Because
you think of the pidyon ben. What are the conditions for it?
What do you mean?
It needs to be a regular birth.
Yeah, but assuming.
Okay, you have a baby with two heads. You
tell
me how that's possible.
Presumably they had the baby though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean that's this case here,
then
right?
It didn't come out the regular way.
Why?
It's cesarean.
I mean, he came to ask the shadows. Okay, they did.
Yes, but again, if the claim is that there's a chiyuv here for a pidyon, it needs to come out the regular way.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, now most likely that's a little far fetched.
Yeah, but except that he's saying that it did. So
okay, it's just was that person aware of the conditions? But it just sounds a little far fetched. But okay. I'm just thinking about it.
I think Tosfot shares your skepticism. We'll get to that. But assuming that this case did actually happen, and it was assuming it was a natural birth, which is the question that's being asked here. So Atahu Saba, an old man came. V'tanale chayav litein lo yud slaim. Right? We know that there's a chiyuv to do 5. So he says he has to give 10, double. Why? Ini, is that true? V'atani Rabbi Bar Chama mitoch shnemar. It says padot tifdeh et bechor ha'adam. Right, so there's this teaching about pidyon ben that you have to redeem the firstborn. Shomei ani afilu nitraf betoch lamed Talmud lomar ach. So you might think that even somebody who's a treifa, who will die within 30 days or soon after 30 days, should have to do pidyon haben. So therefore the Torah teaches mi'ach to exclude somebody that won't survive. So why would I think that this is different? So shani hacha de begulgolet tala rachamana, that the Torah by pidyon haben specifically uses the language of gulgolet, which is a head. So it's not. It's in the context of it has to be natural birth, but the mitzvah is on the head. So if you have this case of someone who is born naturally and has two heads, so they're both considered the bechor because it's one body. So they both have the status of bechor, but it's two skulls. So therefore, it's double the mitzvah, okay, or double the coinage. So that's clear. That's psak in the Gemara, and that's kind of agreed upon. What isn't necessarily clear is how you then go and apply that back to the case of tefillin, because there, it's the begulgolet, it's not necessarily the case by tefillin, that's specifically by pidyon haben. So the question that Shimon raised about whether a person who, assuming they can grow to the age of bar mitzvah and have two heads in one body, are they considered one person or two, stands kind of unresolved in this Gemara. Rashi, in his explanation of why you need the 10 coins, says the chad bechorhu, it's one person and it's one bechor. Ditle trei reishe, we consider one human being with two heads. V'chashiv kitren, v'afagav dioledet te'omim lo yayiv elaheslaim. Right, if you give birth to twins, only one of them has to give pidyon haben. Kedamrinan beperek yesh bechor l'nacha. It says that explicitly. In a different place. There it's two separate people, and here it's one person. They both have the hagdara of being born peterachem, right? And that's why there's a exception for C-section. It doesn't give pidyon haben. Tosfot, in his comment on this, I think this is a very unusual Tosfot. He says as follows. We don't have this type of thing in this world. Aval yesh b'midrash, but there is a midrash that says Ashmedai otzi mitachat karka adam echad sheyesh lo shnei rashim. One time Ashmedai, who was king of the demons, he pulled out from the ground a man with two heads. Lifnei Shlomo Melech. Okay, v'nasa isha. This person got married, ve'olid banim, and had children. Kayotze bo b'shnei rashim. He had children. He had both children like him with two heads. Right? This man married a normal woman with one head, and they had children. Some children had two heads like the father, some children have one head like the mother. And he died. So then they come to argue about the inheritance. Okay, so the people with two heads said, we're two people, so we should get double the inheritance. The people with one head said, no, you should get the single inheritance because you're one person. So they come before Shlomo Bedin, all right, which goes back to the fundamental question: is one person with two heads, are they considered one person or two?
It's pretty interesting that he says,
right.
But there's this story, and with Shlomo Melech is like,
pulled them up from
but it's not within the realm of Olam Hazeh.
Right. Exactly, because I think maybe he's troubled by the same thing that the Tana was troubled.
He brought them into this world, though. This was demon.
It's a medrash. It's not. It didn't. That's
so the question is, Olam Hazeh. Does that mean
in today's modern world?
That's not the way.
Does it mean? It's not clear what that means, really. Does it mean
it doesn't happen naturally? But it did happen in this case where they were like brought up from this weird.
Meaning, if he brings it before Shlomo Melech, it's clear it's in this world. But maybe Olam Hazeh doesn't mean versus Olam Haba. It just means in kind of outside of Ashmedai coming and doing it, you know.
It sounds to me it's more like a mind game that Shlomo Melech had than something that actually occurred.
Yeah, I mean, what's clearly inspiring this medrash? I mean, does this remind us of any story, perhaps? This medrash. This will become clear later on.
With the splitting.
Very good. Right. Well, this will become clear in a second. We know of a case of Shlomo with not one person with two heads, but one baby with two mothers. Yeah. So it's clear that's
in the text of Navi, right?
Yeah, that's in the Nach. Yeah, exactly. We'll see now that the Mefarshim explicitly tie it to that story, which is obviously what's informing this medrash. Shita Mekubetzet says, Shlomo b'chachmato hirtiach mayim v'chisa echad min harashim. So he boiled water, and he covered one of the heads of this two-headed person. V'shafach harotchim al rosh hasheni, and then he poured the boiling water on the second head. Okay, michumat tsar harotchim tza'ak b'shnei harashim, and both heads cried out in pain. Amar Shlomo shma mina. The tolada achat l'shnei harashim. It's one person, not two. Ve'en nidon ela k'ish echad. Right? This is obviously inspired by the story of Shlomo with cutting the baby in half. And then Ben Yehoyada takes it even further. He says, V'chatav aboneh b'mamar in Yaakov, שמעתי שגזר שלמה להשליך מים נותחין על אחד מהשני ראשים, ואם לא ירגיש ראש השני, איתו שני חלקים. עד כאן לשונו הבונה שם. Ben Yehoyada quotes the Boneh, which is the author of the Ein Yaakov, who basically says what the Shita Mekubetz says. And the Ben Yehoyada continues and says, V'nireh ki ha-Tosfot kivnu al zeh midrash asher hatakti le'el. That's what Tosfot meant, even though they didn't record this idea of the boiling water. U'ma sheshama ha-Boneh hu emet. And he says, that's true, ach lo shema davar shalem. They didn't hear the full story. Ki hanisayon haya b'mayim rotchin, v'yayin yashan u'veged pishtan, t'rak be'ele ala hanisayon. והוא עניין סיגולי כאשר כתבתי ולא טבעי. דהה חמין לבד לא הועילו. So I'm not 100% sure what he's getting at here, but he says that it's even more complex than kind of what was said earlier. But it's clear again that the idea is trying to figure out if this is a person with two heads considered one person or two. And we have this interesting kind of midrash that takes the Gemara Menahot, which is a purely halachic context in the end of the day, and kind of extrapolates it out into the realm of Agadah.
Is there any source for the Medrash of Ashmedai outside of Taisus, or is that the earliest? Is there anything?
So I actually spent some time trying to find it, because that's why, remember when I introduced Tosfos just a few minutes ago, I said this is a very unusual Tosfos, because I couldn't find an earlier, I couldn't find an earlier source of Midrash that says this idea.
Oh yeah, the whole question of Kohelet. When you have when it says there, Ani Kohelet Hayiti Melech al Yerushalayim. So the Midrash says that what is Hayiti? It means a king that lost his throne. It sounds a little interesting because the Midrash of Ashmedai was the claim was that he got rid of Shlomo in some way and took up his form or something and became and sat in the throne instead of him instead. So
but I think that's in the Talmud though, in Gittin, if I'm not mistaken, perhaps.
Okay, it goes back.
But yes, it's the same theme of Ashmedai and Shlomo having some relationship.
There are several stories when it comes to the Shlomo Melech and Ashmedai, the construction of the Mikdash, the fact that he didn't have the
Shamir.
Yeah,
100%, definitely.
Interesting.
Thank you. But yes, that doesn't mean that there isn't an older source, but...
well, if you think the language first, you think because the Tanakh was, the Gemara in Bavel was under Farsi rule.
Yeah.
Because you think of Shavor Malka is mentioned in the Gemara, and you think of all the names that are mentioned there. Ashmedai is a Farsi name.
Yeah.
It comes from the Farsi.
Okay.
So you think that it's typical that would show up already, in the Gemara and be used as a, used as something, just an idea, not necessarily something that actually occurred, but so.
We spoke a couple weeks ago about the
I missed out the good stuff. So
no, it's all good. No, that's definitely. Yeah, no, definitely there's a source for Ashmedai and Shlomo in the Talmud, but this specific midrash about the two-headed person, I was not able to find an earlier source than this Tosfot. But yeah. It's unusual both in that sense, but also that Tosfot Bichlal is mitasek with this. Right? He's not usually one to go and say, here's a midrash that's just out of left field. Just to finish on this idea and then to go on to Adam Arishon, so the Khatam Sofer, I saw a kind of really nice little vort based on this whole thing that we just developed. So he says as follows: וראיתי בסוף ספר כל יהודה בשם הגאון somebody זצ"ל, זה בחומש הפקודים. Sorry, do you want to say the name of the Rebbe? I can't read. There's too many alepphs and vavs for me. It's Krakauer. Okay, Shmuel Krakauer. Krakover.
As a matter of fact, I had a principal back in my with the same name.
Shmuel Krakover?
Not Shmuel, but the same family name.
Okay.
So yeah. Okay. In my
elementary
school.
I'm so sorry.
In my elementary
Please
school,
forgive me.
Never mind. All right.
Apologies. You're supposed to call out Omer b'Shem Omer Mevi Gulal. I shouldn't have done that. Yeah. Okay. Me'agaon Shmuel Krakover. The Bechumash Apkudim, which is Sefer Bamidbar, so we count all the tribes and we count Shevet Levi. And the difference is, right, all the tribes it's 20 and up, right, 20 to 60, you count all the men. And Shevet Levi, the Torah tells Moshe to count a month and up, right? So it says, Ne'emar b'pkudei b'nei Yisrael gulgolotam. It uses the word gulgolot, like similar to Pidyon haben. So it says to count them by their heads, but it only uses that word by all of Bnei Yisrael, v'lo b'shevet Levi. But it doesn't use that word when it says count Shevet Levi. And his theory is, mishum de b'shevet Levi, haya makom lit'ot de'ata l'ribuye mi sheyesh lo bet rashim. Why? Because this was what we said before, right? That there was this concept that someone could live to be a month with 2 heads, but he couldn't live to be 20. Okay, so you can say Gulgolotam by all the tribes because you're only counting them from 20 and up, and there's no reason to be confused that you'd count a person with 2 heads twice because no one can live to that age. But by Shevet Levi, you can't use the word Gulgolet because you may then have someone from Shevet Levi with 2 heads and he's over a month, and then you'd count him twice, and so that's why.
Or you can base on how Levi were counted. They were counted from a month and up, if I recall correctly, right?
Shevet Levi.
Yeah.
Right.
So what occurs from that age and up? The skull isn't closed yet. So
That would be
their Gulgot isn't formed.
Yeah.
So
Meaning
could be that the idea was you have a full-grown person with a fully formed skull or brain for that matter, and
okay. Yes.
another idea.
Yeah.
And according to the Chassam Sefer, that would be in the pasuk, basically showing that it's considered one person.
Correct. Yes. Because you're counting every individual.
It's, right, it's a proof that that's considered one person.
Yeah. It's just, I think, a really sharp way of applying this analysis in Menahot to something totally different. It's very, very nice. But yes, it does seem to support that. Okay, so we still seem to kind of be oscillating back and forth on whether it's one person, whether it's 2 people. Right? Just obviously, just as an aside, right? According to what I think modernity would say, it would be 2 separate people, right? Like it's the story of the Siamese twins. They have 2 different names, 2 different birth certificates.
Well, if the idea is that both heads are,
they function independently.
There is a function there. Then obviously,
The ones that are alive nowadays are like that.
Yeah.
Completely different personalities and thoughts. And
Right.
I mean, you have even one person with one head with 2 different personalities. But anyway.
You're saying no raya from there.
It's not right from there, yeah.
oh, that's for the DSM or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh man, I thought you were going to go in a different direction. 2 genders. So,
No.
Okay.
We stopped at 50. No, what's the count? What's the
It's
latest?
the next pasuk.
That's it.
It's
Right.
the next pasuk.
Well, it actually ties exactly. Thank you. Adam Rishon, was he a man, a woman? Driganus, how many genders was he? Good. So, shifting gears a little bit. Famously, man was created male and female together.
you say that, it says bara is so, singular.
Okay, thank you for correcting me. Good, so it's contradicting itself within 4 words, right? Which is it? Is it he was created on his own, right? And we know obviously then Perek Bet, it says man, and then the rib was taken and woman, right? And it gets even more complex if we look in Perek Hey.
Isn't the regular approach that the first parak is just is more of a summary of the creation of Adam?
It sounds like that. This pasuk is saying he created him and then he created them.
Okay.
A summary of the story, which then is
And
told.
then Perek Beis elaborates how Zachar and Nekeva was actually formed.
Okay. Yep. So that's, I think, one. You're right, and that's one way of approaching it. We'll see that there's what you said, and then a different approach as well. Yeah, definitely. Zeh Sefer Toldot Adam. This is Perek Hey Pasuk Aleph. B'yom bara Elohim Adam b'dmut Elohim asa oto. Again, singular male. Zachar nekeva b'ra'am. Again, you have this idea that you created them together in the same exact breath. V'varach otam v'yikra'at shemam Adam b'yom bara'am. So you say that their name was Adam, right? There's this weird kind of combination. So again, you could understand it like the Moshe said. It's just a summary that he called them Adam. But specifically this is, I think, why people have a hard time with what you said, or some opinions of Vayikrat Shemam Adam. It's not just a summary of, okay, man and women were created, and then this is how it happened, but they were called Adam together, man and, like, Zachar and Nekeva. So let's see how the various approaches, how do they understand this? So the Gemara in Brachot, and also in Eruvin, says as follows. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, Dio Partzuf Panim Hayal Adam Arishon, Shnemar Achor Vakeden Tzartani. He was split. Basically, Adam Arishon was literally half male, half female. Half his face was one, half was the other. K'tiv, Vayiven Hashem Elohim et hatzela v'gomer. So how do you then understand that next pasuk of God took the bone and made a woman from the bone? Rav Shmuel, it's machloket. Chad amar parzuf v'chad amar zanav. So Rav says that that's a reference to the parzuf, that he took this androgynous Adam Arishon and separated it. And one said zanav, which means basically the traditional understanding that there was some bone that he took, maybe a tail, but it means that man was created as a man. He took out the bone and made a woman.
It could be a little hint for the idea of evolution. You think of, a man, well, think about it.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
I'm just
predated Darwin by 1800
by
years.
the way,
Yeah.
to bring this Dvar Torah wasn't brought by me. I have to give the original. So Professor Avram Grossman, he's my aunt's father, by the way. So he gave this Dvar Torah back in his grandson's bar mitzvah in Gush Etzion. So he was dealing with the different ideas of how the separation was done to begin with. So he mentions also this. So he gives the hint. Gave the hint. Yeah, you think of the idea of it. These are not my words, so I'm just giving his intake. Yes. So that's in his name. I'm just
Very nice.
blast from the past.
Yeah. No, there's a whole another shiur that could be given about how you read evolution into Bereshit. Yeah. You have all these people, the kind of Bnei Elohim and all this, and who are all these kind of Anshe Shem, were they people, were they Neanderthal? Anyways, yeah. For another time, maybe. The Adam Arishon was the first one with Vaypach Bepav Nishmat Chaim, not necessarily the first Homo something, but anyways, for another time. Bishlama leman da'amar parzuf. Haynu dichtiv zachar nekav Abraham. Okay, wait. So I don't understand. According to Rav, who says parzuf, so I understand the pasuk that says zachar nekav Abraham because he created Adam Arishon as half male, half female, and then he separated them and created woman, and that's what Vayiven Hashem Elohim et Hatzela means. Elaman damar zanav, but according to Shmuel, who understands it the way I think we all traditionally understood it, which is that he took a rib or a tail or whatever it is and made woman afterwards. What does that even mean? That they were created together. Rabbi Abahu, Rabbi Abahu Rami says, one pasuk tells me they're created together. It's the same pasuk even says that. So I think this is similar to what you were saying, but a little bit different. It's not that it's a summary that they were created kind of together, but rather that in kind of divine potential, when God first thought, whatever that means, to create man, he first thought to create them unified and combined as one being. But in the end, when he actually did the Maaseh and created, he only created Adam. And then created Chava afterwards.
Well, there's also obviously the Midrashim that speak of the first woman as Lilith. And then came.
That was a whole separate.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Yeah,
bringing that a thing. No, the difference is between the first and second
right.
Chapters of
Yeah, exactly. Right, you have Lilith. Yeah. But yeah, what were you saying about the order?
According to this, it doesn't fit with the pasuk where the pasuk says "B'tzelem Elokim bara Isa Zachar Nekeva bara Isa." Meaning, if first Alav Machshava, and then practically it should be in the
other order. Yeah. Right. Fair enough. Yeah. Right. First is the exactly in the same pasuk.
That's the ultimate.
Yeah.
The hands down.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's a stretch to apply that within the same pasuk, but fair enough. It's a good question. I hadn't thought of it. Yeah, the order is backwards in terms of first the thought and then the creation. Rashi in his explanation on this Gemara, he says partzuf. So what does that mean? Chilkol l'shnayim she'azachar mikan v'nekeva mikan. Okay, v'zanav she'alo l'adam harishon v'nitlo mimenu v'arat chava. Basically, how we understood it. So far, so good. Now let's look at the Gemara in Ketubot and Daf Chet Amud Aleph. This is where things get a bit interesting. Levi ikla levei Rabbi behilule de Rabbi Shimon Barei. Okay, Levi went to go visit Rabbi. Barich Chamei. Okay, Rabbi Shimon was getting married. It was Sheva Brachot. So Levi, Barich Chamesh, he did 5 of the 7 Sheva Brachot. This is in the context of the halachot of the Sheva Brachot, what they are and all that. Rav Asi ikla levei Rabbi Ashi, ve'ilulei demabre, but a separate time, Rav Asi went to Rav Ashi's son's Sheva Brachot, Barishit, and he gave 6 blessings. Lema baha kamiflagi. Why did they have different numbers? Demar savar chada yitzira havai, umar savar shtei yitzirot havai. Right, because we know the brachot of Sheva Brachot is Yotzera Adam, and then I forget what the second one is, but basically the question is: you have 2 brachot about the Yitzirat Adam, and you have 1 bracha about the Yitzirat Adam. So it depends. Let's suggest that they're arguing about whether there was 1 or 2 Adams, or there was 1 or 2 creations, and that's what they're arguing about. The Gemara rejects that and says, "Lo, the chule alma chad yitzira hava." No, everyone agrees there was just 1 creation. And then what are they arguing about? Mar savar batar machshava azlinan, umar savar batar maise azlinan. Okay, ki hadar of Yehuda Rame, and here Rav Yehuda is what we saw through Babao earlier. K'tiva ivra limet adam betzalmo ch'tiv zachar nekva b'ra'am ha'ketzad b'tchila la b'machshava livrot shnayim levasof nivra echad. He says here everybody agrees that there was, in the end of the day, there was 1 Adam that was just a man. Not just a man. There was 1 Adam, but initially God thought to create 2, and then in the end He just created 1. So it's a bit different here, and we'll talk about how there's different ways to understand this. First, just the Torah Tmima and his understanding of this Gemara. He says as follows: Okay, so what does it mean, to create 2? So Torah Tmiyam understands that it means to create 2 separate people in the beginning, a man and a woman. Okay, but in the end he created just a man, and he took the woman from the man. Okay, so let's just be clear from the outset, there's another way to understand, not the way the Torah Tmiyam interprets that, right? But in theory you could say 2 in one, right? He wanted to do maybe what we saw Rav said about the Partsuf, but in the end he ended up doing just Adam and created woman separate. So Torah Tmima has one way to interpret this, but it could be that you could understand it differently based on what we saw in the Gemara Brachot. But that opinion of the Dio Partsuf is not mentioned in Ketubot.
But especially though, because the Torah Tmima, the way he says it, sounds like Shtei Yitziris Haba. One was Adam, and then from him was, Yitzer, another human. And they're countering that and saying, no, everyone agrees it was 1. But, I don't know. Just saying.
You're saying this, the idea that Adam was created and Chava came from him is 2 separate creations.
Technically.
Okay.
According to the Luz one.
Oh boy. We only have 2 minutes left. Yes, that is true. Okay. Let's try to. This is actually a whole sugya of how to understand Rashi, who seems to contradict himself here, but we don't have a lot of time. So I'll just try to maybe on a very high level. I think I alluded to the potential problem. Let's just see how Rashi understands it. Okay. So Chada Yitzira Havai. So Rashi, when he says it means 1 creation. Kamanda Amar Be'eruvin Vayiven Tatzela Partsuf Shemitchilat Briyato Nivra Shnei Partsufin Zachar Mifanav Nekeva Me'achor. So Rashi says the opinion that says here Chada Yitzira Havai, that it was 1 creation. Rashi says that is like Rav.
This is what I'm saying.
This is
saying what I'm saying.
Rashi's saying what you're saying. Good. That Rav is saying that this opinion of Chad Yitzira, let's say that's according to Rav, who said Partsuf, and then Shtei Yitzirot, Keman Amar Zanav Haya, Umimenu Nivrei Ta'isha. Very kan Shtei Yitzirot, right? But then the Gemara, if you remember, rejects that Havamina. The Gemara says, no, everyone agrees it's 1 creation, and rather it's the Machshava Maisa. So what does that mean? Batar Machshava Zinan. Sheshnayim alu b'machshava libarot, v'nivra echad. That 2 were thought to be created, but in the end only 1 was created. But yes, Rashi says we can make an equation here that Rav really holds according to, in the Hava Amina, the one who said Chad Yitzira, and Shmuel holds according to the Shtei Yitzirot.
But regardless, it was 1 being that was created and not 2 in the beginning. Regardless if it was 1 Yitzira or 2. regardless if it was Partzuf or not.
Right.
It was one entity that was created versus two in the beginning.
So that's the confusion here, is the nuance between an entity and a partzuf, or a, right. Is it a physical body? Is it a face? Is it, yeah, exactly. But yes. Tosfot, in contrast, he says, Sarich lomar dahainu kiman da'amar partzuf echad. So Tosfot actually argues the opposite. He says what? He says the opinion that says chad yitzira havai, okay, would be according to Rav, who said it was dio partzuf. Sorry.
That was one Partzuf.
The ka'amar batachi dechule alma chad yitzira havai, mar savar batar machshava is linan. So I think he argues, he says, it can't be what we just said, right? Remember, you just said, Rashi understands it like I do, that Rav said partzuf, and that's chad yitzira, because it's two phases in one, but Tosfot is saying, but the Gemara rejects that explanation. So that can't be what it means. I think that's what's going on here. V'reish perek sheni de'ervin mashma behedya, the lamand alma partzuf echad, hav Allah b'machshava lihibarot shnayim, that if we remember back in Eruvin, that the one who said it's one face, that it's partzuf echad, it was one face and not two faces. In other words, Shmuel, he was the one that you had Rabbi Abahu come and said initially God thought to create two, and in the end he only created one. So again, I think we need to kind of think about this a bit in order to kind of get into the details. But basically, Tosfot is switching it, and he's saying we need to understand that the one who says "B'tchila alav l'machshava livrot shnayim" is the one who says partzuf. That the shnayim there is the two faces, which is Rav, the V'sof barachad, and opposed to the one who says to create one is the Zanav that created one initially, which is the opposite of what Rashi interpreted, right? Where Rashi says no, one is the partzuf because it's one body. So it's like, are you saying it's one is the number of faces, or is it the number of bodies? And therefore, Rashi and Tosfot, they kind of swap each other in terms of how they interpret these two Gemaras working together. And then Maharsha kind of goes a bit further. We don't have to kind of look into that now. It's the last source if you want on your own time. In the end of the day, when all the dust settles, you kind of have here this interesting idea, and I'll kind of close with maybe a nice Musar Haskel to take home. But one way to think about what does it mean that in the beginning God thought to create two, and in the end He only created one? The idea that initially God thought to create Adam and Chava. One way to understand is that God thought to create them as one, Zachar Nekeva Bara'am, but in the end He created Adam and then Chava. So if you interpret it like that, perhaps the message could be that it's true that men and women are actually separate. They're two separate bodies, Lamaisa. But in terms of the Machshava, which is kind of a representative of the ideal, that they're kind of thought of in their potential as being unified, as being one, and that's how they should view themselves as well, as being Zachar Nekeva Bara'am, even though practically they're different bodies, but they have the Dio Partzuf in the sense that they're really kind of two halves of the same coin, and that's what Zugiyut is all about.
Like in their ideal way of being, it's one organism.
It's one organism.
Which is the logic it uses when it talks about relations. It says V'yul Basar Echad or something like that.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. V'yul Basar Echad. Perfect. Yeah.
Or where do you want to sever them? And what end of the spine?
What?
Where do you want to sever? No, think of it.
No,
At the end of it, because it's either you're talking about two of them when they were back to back, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you start from the head, or you start from the bottom. It's pretty simple.
I don't understand. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, if you think of the idea of man and woman back to back,
Yes.
okay, so you can think of it as
Created as one.
Created as one, he needs to cut down the middle.
Yeah.
You start from the bottom, you start from the top.
And therefore what?
And therefore, I don't know, it can make changes as far as the outcome, obviously.
Oh, the anatomy? Okay. Okay.
And then, obviously, if you want to think of the connection between man and woman, if you want to think of, does it start from the head, does it start down, does it start from the bottom?
Yeah, I mean, it does. We didn't say this explicitly, I think, but it does say kind of the Dio Partzuf is not half and half; it's front and back, and it doesn't say which is the front, which is the back.
Okay.
So it could be Adam was in the front, or it could be Chava was in the front. The back's pretty similar.
again, you got to start severing
Unlock
somewhere, no?
things.
Yeah.
And the key
Fair
in
enough.
Hebrew is like to understand the rationale behind
Because the word sela, by the way, the word sela does not mean have to be rib.
I made
It
the
means
launch
side.
video.
Yes, correct.
So,
20 seconds.
That's why it's not. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Right, it doesn't. Rib is just the way it's. It's kind of like the Pri Etzadat. Everyone assumes it's an apple, but that's a Christian thing.
oh, that's there's a
The
whole-
Midrash actually says it's almost every possible option but an apple.
Rav Chaim Navon wrote a book about it. Chaval lo achal tapuach.
Yeah, chaval lo achal.
Shattering myths and
Yeah,
common myths.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right.
תודה רבה.
Good. Toda rabba. Shkoyach. Have a great week. Sheniska.